I have an important announcement about Regina George that I have to make because I'm seeing these takes again that I can't. Regina George is a truly iconic character, and there are so many reasons to like her and find her interesting, and she is captivating and iconic and stands the test of time for a reason. She is a villain. She is the villain. Regina is the meanest girl. Regina is an antagonist. It's okay to just say that you like that. Regina is the meanest. It is not Janice. Regina was horrible, ruthless, had no loyalty to anybody, and everybody was glad when she got taken down for a reason. She was awful. Truly an antagonist, especially if we're talking about this original Regina from the 2004 film. Yes, Janice could be mean. Janice took it too far. All the girls could be mean. That was the point of the film. Janice was not worse than Regina. Janice acted out of retaliation, and I could go into heavy detail on what sparked Janice's retaliation in the first place and how it happened, but everything. But Janice is not the villain in Mean Girls. You're crazy. And even this version of Regina, who, is so complex and interesting, very dimensional, and I love it, still an antagonist. Truly still an antagonist. I love her too. She's classic and iconic, but be honest, would you actually want to be friends with Regina? Would you really, answer the question, who would you rather be friends with, Regina or Janice? If you say Regina, you're lying to yourself. You don't have to lie and say she's not the villain. It's not Janice. So I got a lot of comments saying that Regina is more transparent and therefore that makes her better, and she's more upfront about her meanness, and Janice paints herself as a victim, and I have to say that is completely false. Regina is not transparent. She is not direct or honest or upfront. She is actually extremely sneaky, calculating, and manipulative behind the scenes, and this was actually emphasized in the film. She just also happens to be bluntly rude to random people for no reason and say mean things, but that doesn't make her honest. I would actually say this was explicitly emphasized when Aaron Samuels, who was never the sharpest tool in the shed and one of the many people that Regina duped and played and sideswiped, not that he was any prize, but when he says everybody has good and bad in them, Regina's just more upfront about it, and then he is gobsmacked, flabbergasted when Katie's she's cheating on you, and he is proven wrong, although it had been proven wrong several times before. Yes, she is also outwardly rude to your face, but most of her dastardly deeds are done sneakily behind the scenes, in big ways and in small ways. We see right away that yes, she will say nasty things to people's faces, but she'll also compliment them under the guise of being nice and really make fun of them. Not only was she cheating on Aaron, but the whole Katie and Aaron debacle, there was nothing upfront or honest about that. She tells Katie that she's okay with her liking Aaron and even says I'll talk to him for you. And what she actually does is humiliate Katie by making up a nasty rumor, which she loves to do, and then kisses him. And she's supposed to be Katie's friend. That's not upfront or honest in the very least. Not to mention that this is what actually sparks the revenge party, if you will, with Janice and Damien, and this is what sparks Janice into the actual action. Of course, she has her own reasons, but she's also upset on Katie's behalf and on behalf of the greater good. And of course, Janice absolutely takes things too far. She could be a mean girl, and she admitted that herself, but Janice didn't paint herself as a victim. Janice was a victim, and that's a totally different thing. Regina started and led a homophobic school-wide movement to ostracize Janice from everyone. So what we know of this story is that Regina and Janice were friends, and she was apparently a horrible friend and blew her off for her boyfriend. And because Janice was why didn't you call me back? She was she's obsessed with me, and literally had people sign a petition, homophobic in sentiment, and had her completely ostracized to the point where she was bullied so bad she had to drop out of school. And of course, Janice has personal resentment, and she is a victim. She's not painting herself as a victim. She's one of many. When everybody, including the teachers, raises their hands and says I've been personally victimized by Regina George, that should tell you something. And like Janice says, there are two kinds of evil people who do evil things and people who watch evil being done and do nothing to stop it. And that is definitely part of Janice's motivation. She's motivated by what she does to Katie, by what she does to everybody. That's certainly not to say that everything Janice did was good or right, but people were glad when Regina was knocked down for a reason. Everyone was. And I would say that's very different than what Regina does, which is not acting out of retaliation, but is being nasty to everyone for no reason, only for her own personal gain or her own personal enjoyment, including people who she considers her best friends. She's completely awful to Gretchen and Karen, and obviously Katie. She's constantly setting them up on three-way phone calls and talking behind their back and saying bad things about them, and she would absolutely turn on them in a second. And none of that is upfront or honest. It's just nasty, and Regina isn't a true friend. She's not loyal to anybody. And out of the two, I would absolutely say that Janice is the more upfront one, because Janice is only sneaky and conniving to Regina and by proxy the Plastics, but she's not particularly vindictive to Karen or Gretchen, a group that she was brutally and actively actively pushed out of and ostracized by, right? Janice certainly wasn't perfect, but she was a friend to Katie, and even towards the end there, she really was done with like the plastic sabotage, and Katie was the one who kept it going, and Katie started blowing her off for plastic stuff, right? And Janice was genuinely a friend to Katie. She genuinely cared about Katie, and she wanted to just spend time with Katie. And when Janice finds out that she was lied to and betrayed again, then she says it straight up to Katie. Regina, contrarily, does the whole I want to watch the world burn thing. Sneakily and secretly sets them up for the whole burn book, whereas after Janice was betrayed, like, she openly was like, this is what we did. Katie betrayed me, right? Like, so even so, all the girls can be mean, all the girls can be sneaky and work behind the scenes. That was the point of the film, but I would say Regina takes the cake in this respect too. She is the meanest, and she is also the least honest and the least upfront. She's the villain, and that's okay. You all remember when the Bonrad Collective tried to launch a campaign against Jeremiah, criticizing him for not picking Belly up when they went to go find Cobweb at Brown? And they were saying how it proved that Jeremiah didn't mean it and was a dishonest liar when he said, I'll always come and get you, Belly, and when he said literally any time about driving her to volleyball camp, and how it foreshadows Jeremiah making Belly take the bus to his frat house in book 3 because Belly had to take the bus to Brown. There are so many things wrong with that argument they were using, and I was cracking up last night. Like, I truly was, because it's so false in every way. But first of all, number one thing we gotta address, we gotta have a little geography lesson, because I know these Bonrads do not know New England like that. You guys do not come from the East Coast, I can tell you that. Do you guys know where Brown University is? It's in Rhode Island, and Jeremiah and Conrad live in Boston. So you see, Brown University is only about an hour away from there. Belly Button is all the way down in Philadelphia. That is 5.5 hours on a good day. You hit traffic, it's more like 7. And then the distance from Philly to Brown is another 5 hours at least. So you're telling me that the correct course of action when your man was missing, not answering his phone calls, and they were frantically looking for him, Jeremiah should have delayed the trip by at least 6 hours to go all the way down to Pennsylvania to pick up Belly, and then all the way back up to Brown. So we're looking at least 11 hours, probably more like 13, 14. That's why you shouldn't talk about things you don't know. You don't know Wawa, you don't know this. Anyway, and then the next argument is, well, in the books he did. The books, totally different series of events. On this point in the book, number one, Belly and Jeremiah were on totally different relationship terms. Like, Belly and Jeremiah don't even get together until the end of the second book. That was all moved up and squished into season 1. So Jeremiah isn't rightfully upset with Belly, and he calls her and asks her to go. And second of all, in the book, Belly and Jeremiah didn't know or decide that they were going to Brown until after they were already together. So Jeremiah drives down and gets Belly, and then he's like, do you know anything? Like, I don't even know his roommate's name or anything like that. And then they talk, and then they decide they're gonna go to Brown together. So that's a totally different thing. If they had decided, let's go to Brown when they were still on the phone, I'm thinking Button would have been taking the bus anyway, because that just saves like hours and hours of time, and it makes no sense otherwise. And then third point, they would also claim that Conrad was better in this regard because of this, when he drove to Belly and took her to a cold house with no food in it, didn't even stop at the Wawa, and she had to find dusty cocoa in the pantry. And that's really nice that he was able to take that drive and bring her back to the beach house and get laid. But that is not the same thing. And if you want to talk about driving, we could talk about season 1, how Belly and Jeremiah are always in the car, and Jeremiah is pretty much always driving unless he's teaching Belly to drive. He's the one who she calls, and he comes and picks her up. And also in season 2, who's doing all the driving and chauffeuring? Because it wasn't Conrad, except that one time that he got laid, or the time that he left his brother with the medical bills and lied to Belly's face. But here, I seem to remember it was Jer who was doing most of the driving. He was the chauffeur, and your man was in the back hurling insults, antagonizing them, and throwing their insecurities in their face. So I don't know. Bonus question, who drove Belly to volleyball camp? And she said, thanks for driving me. And he said, literally anytime. It was not Conrad. And then on the topic of Jeremiah makes Belly take the bus to his frat house, again, another false narrative, fake media. Belly takes the bus to get around campus in general, and there are just as many examples of Jeremiah going to Belly's dorm or meeting her. For example, the opening, right, where Jeremiah is laying in her bed and he's like, I brought you my sub, and they're snuggling up. She's walking over to the party at the sorority house and she texts him and is like, I'm walking, and he meets her halfway and carries her on his back the rest of the way. He spent the whole week after spring break in my room hanging out with me. And then we have when she first moves in and she tells Jeremiah, no, it's okay, go, because like she thinks she's gonna like be buddy with the girls and make friends with them that night. And then she realizes that she feels nervous and lonely, and she texts him and says, will you come back? And she says, I knew he would. So clearly Jeremiah doesn't have a problem going to Belly. She isn't like constantly complaining about having to take the bus. This is something they made up. The only time she sort of did was when she was being a nasty, insufferable, ungrateful toad, when she was complaining about his allergies and the Indian food and everything. And even then she wasn't really, but he also said like, I'll go there. So that is actually just not even the thing that they made it to be. None of this was. I know that I could come up with better arguments for their side than they do. And that is the sad part. You know, this is the real tea about the bus, because we were talking about how Bonrads were spinning this narrative about how Jeremiah was just so mean and rude for not going to pick Belly up from Pennsylvania, and how she had to take the bus to Brown and did nothing but prove that they know nothing about the Northeast, because that would logistically make no sense. But you really want to talk about the bus, they should be thanking Jeremiah, because if it wasn't for him, Conrad would have been taking a bus home from Brown. Because one thing about Button, she was ready to leave him there. God bless her, she really was. Jeremiah was like, we have his keys, and she was like, that's not my problem. She was so unenthused by this interruption. She finally got this man to cave. She was finally getting what she wanted, and she was like, you are not messing this one up for me. She didn't want to go after him, talk to him, nothing. And the thing is, if Jeremiah really was the narcissistic, manipulative border collie that you all have deluded yourselves into believing he is, when Belly said let's go, he would have said yes, but he didn't. So thank him, because that was not Button's doing. Remember that. I don't know about Plan Belly, but this was never part of Belly's plan. She did not want him in that car. So you thank Jeremiah, and if you want to talk about a bus, thank him, because your man would have been the one taking the bus home. You never would have gotten your beloved sassy Conrad. And this is exactly why I simply cannot abide with the people who say that Janice and Regina are the same, because they are so fundamentally different. People who say that Janice is worse than Regina are just delusional. Like, that's just simply factually incorrect. Like, that's crazy. But I love this whole thread of comments you left, and you summarized so many of my sentiments, because yes, Janice and Regina are more similar than they appear. All the girls are more similar than they appear. They could all be mean, right? But there is a fundamental difference between Regina and Janice, and that is in that Regina is truly a friend to no one, like not a single person, and that is not true of Janice. Janice has a very deep sense of loyalty, actually, and is genuinely shocked and perturbed by betrayal, and that's what motivates so many of her actions, because loyalty is very innate to her. Janice would never set up Katie and Damien. She would never call them stupid, ugly sleuths behind their back. Like, she was very much for them. Janice did genuinely care about Katie and consider her friend, and she never would have done those things that Regina did to Katie. And actually, Regina's mistreatment of Katie and her betrayal and the whole Aaron thing is what sparks the whole revenge party. Yes, Janice was vengeful and angry and hurt on her own behalf, but she was also hurt on behalf of Katie and on behalf of everybody. Like, Janice was taking down the school bully. How is that in any way equatable or even in any way similar to Regina, who is literally just deliberately cruel to people for no reason, like random people, to the point where everybody in the whole school was like, I've been victimized by her. That is not true of Janice. Like, Regina is a terrible friend to Gretchen, a terrible friend to Karen, and obviously a terrible friend to Katie, and she's also terrible to the general public. Even when Regina like stands up for Gretchen or something, like with the whole Jason thing, it's only so she can like publicly humiliate someone else, like the whole Taylor Waddell Planned Parenthood thing. That was crazy. It's not really like for Gretchen, because she's terrible to Gretchen. Like, Janice would never do that to Katie or Damien. And like your comment pointed out, Janice made this beautiful art piece for her friends. Regina would never do that because she doesn't care. She doesn't have friends. Just a side note, I have to speak my truth. I know that everybody loves Regina and Janice, and I get that one, but I have to say, like, I've always been a true Katie and Janice enthusiast, and that's my truth. And if you know, you know, like, Katie and Janice in the stage musical, Oh, they're so cute. Anyway, my point is I'm not here for the ridiculous Janice takes, and I think some of you just need to admit that you like Regina the villain, and that is okay. Well, I had said that I was kind of taken aback when Colin in season 2 said I would never dream of courting Penelope Featherington, because I was like, okay, they made that way harsher than it was in the book. And that's not to say that book Colin isn't like worse in other ways, and that's also not to say that I don't still love that book, because I do just love all the Bridgerton books in general, except for the first one because I don't care about Daphne and Simon, but in general, like, Bridgerton's just such a good time. But anyway, that particular thing like actually kind of took me by surprise, because that particular part in the book I felt wasn't as harsh in the books, because he says, I am certainly not going to marry Penelope Featherington, and of course that's not good, but it was like that wasn't really intended to single her out. It was just like his mother was like talking about him getting married, and he was just like getting frustrated, and it had nothing to actually do with Penelope herself. But this was a little bit more like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, why did they make him say that? But now I'm wondering if they're gonna make this also like a misunderstanding and make him look better, hopefully. I don't know, especially with the whole like Lord Fife hates Penelope thing now. Like, maybe they're gonna like make it a misunderstanding, I don't know. All this to say that, like, when I talk about Bridgerton in the future, just know that I agree with pretty much all the criticisms about Colin and Pen, and I'm also simultaneously ridiculously deliriously excited, because the thing with Bridgerton for me is like I simultaneously love and hate everybody at the same time, and like I do have such a soft spot for Colin and Pen. Do they have like some really sweet, really hot scenes? Like, is this height difference kind of unmatched? Do they look incredible? Do I think they're gonna do a good job, and do I think I'm gonna love it by the end? I do. And like, this is just kind of crazy. Like, it's getting real. Like, I'm getting really antsy waiting for it. And the crazy thing is that I like literally like passionately agree with almost every criticism about those books, and I also like really love those books. Like, the brother that annoys me the most is Anthony. I have the most beef with Anthony, and you might know that because I talked a lot of trash about him last year. That being said, like, would I still let him fool me once? Yes. Twice with the mutton chops, maybe 3 times, which I know is an unpopular opinion, but that's my truth, and I think I'm right, and I know everybody disagrees, but I mourned those mutton chops. Anyway, I can't wait for spring. I love Bridgerton. I think it's gonna be a great season. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the whole Colin, Penelope Featherington courting comment? So I said I don't care about Daphne and Simon. I said I love Bridgerton, and I do. I love the books and I love the show, but in both the books and the show thus far, Daphne and Simon just do the least for me. It wasn't like major shade if you do like them. I just don't find them to be like a particularly interesting couple, and I don't really like Daphne. Of course, there is the very problematic Eggswell element to their storyline that I was kind of shocked that they kept in the show. I mean, you're gonna get problematic stuff like if you're reading romance novels from the early 2000s, especially if we're talking about historical romance. All the Bridgerton books are problematic in one way or another. That's kind of just what you're getting. But yeah, there's definitely that I don't love about it. And then also, I just find them boring. Like, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say that they don't have their moments, because they absolutely do. And I will give flowers where flowers are due. And he's very sexy, don't get me wrong. And I think their wedding night scene with the orchestral rendition of Strange is so beautiful. I think it's one of the most beautiful scenes in Bridgerton. But like, for example, you know I have my beef with Anthony Bridgerton, and I'm not even an enemies to lovers girly like that, but I am glad that Anthony and Kate are returning, because I feel like people want to see them, and I do feel like they're interesting. I like the way they interact with the rest of the people in the show. I think they add to the ensemble is what I'm saying, where I feel like Daphne and Simon just in general don't as much. Like, season 1 of Bridgerton, I love it. It is my least favorite out of the Bridgerton iterations thus far, but that's probably just because I like each one better than the next. But I feel like in season 1, I found everybody else more interesting than Daphne and Simon. Not that they didn't have their moments. So I'd say The Duke and I is like my least favorite book, and was like the least interesting season for me, even though I still did love season 1. And you know what else season 1 is responsible for that I have to give flowers? Anthony Bridgerton's glorious mutton chops. I'm sorry, I'm not done talking about it. I brought it up yesterday, and it really awakened in me how much I love them and miss them. Like, I have major beef with this man, you know that. But man, like, this is the Viscount who loved me. This is my Lord Bridgerton, and I'm not taking it back. Sabrina, you are definitely not the only person who doesn't like Anthony Bridgerton's mutton chops. You are for sure in the majority, because the first time I mentioned that, like, very casually, I got flamed. When I said that I love the mutton chops, I got wrung out. And also, like, removing the mutton chops, like, that seemed to be the major talking point of Anthony's, like, leading man glow up. I remember when the first images from season 2 came out, everybody was like, oh my gosh, thank God god, they got rid of that awful facial hair. And I was like, oh, because I could not have disagreed more. And like, not that he doesn't look handsome, obviously he does, but I just think it's funny because he really doesn't look that different. He just has like a cleaner hairstyle and he doesn't have the mutton chops. And well, yes, I get it. He looks very like clean and proper here. This is the Viscount Who Loved Me. I will never take it back. Like, I miss them so much. I'm really like getting my feels about the mutton chops. This is like half the reason I will rewatch season 1 because like I can't. I just think the whole like leading man glow up thing is always funny because I remember everybody was also like gagging over Collins, and I feel like Colin like also looks the same. He just kind of like has his hair fluffed up and he looks great. And I agree with all of you. I'm so curious to see what they will do with Benedict for his season because how do you glow up from this? This is my man when we're talking about Bridgerton, by the way. This is my number one Bridgerton man. I do like all of them, but like this is my man. But I will just say you all are lucky that I was not in charge of Anthony's glow up because I would have been like, don't you dare remove those mutton chops. I love this whole string of comments where you're pointing out how when Belly is in her element in the pool or in the water, right, Conrad is always outside watching her and Jeremiah is with her. And I think this is a really good demonstration of a point that I make a lot about why so many of us find one relationship way more appealing than the other. So like you pointed out, this is one example where Belly is very in her element in the pool, in the water, right? She likes to swim. And Jeremiah and Belly have so much going on in the water. Obviously, they have their iconic season 1 kiss moment in the pool. The equally iconic delicate moment, of course, precious chicken moment in season 1. And in the show, they even have the running into the ocean as like a traditional thing. And I will never get over how we got that scene with Belly and Jeremiah in the pilot. Like, that was actually so iconic. And with Conrad, we have the 2 scenes where he is watching her from the outside of the pool. And I know that some people really like this "what will you give me if I do" scene. I do not, but that's not the point. The point is, with Conrad, he watches, he observes from afar, perhaps he even admires, but he doesn't get down in there with her. And I think this is a very illustrative summation of their relationships as a whole, because one of the main reasons I couldn't figure out why I was supposed to be rooting for Bonrad over Jeremiah and Belly was because they literally are not friends. He doesn't do things with her. All the reasons that Belly supposedly loves Conrad are not things that he does with her. He doesn't spend time with her. It's like things that he did for other people or just like basic things that she watched him doing and she like loved him just because. Like when she says in the books that she like fell in love with him when she watched him making undercooked eggs for his dad for breakfast. I'm not even gonna bring up the Junior Mint story because that is not romantic. I think another good example is the 2 childhood flashbacks that are shared in book 3. So everybody always gags over the glass unicorn because we saw the glass unicorn for like 2 seconds in season 3, but the story of the glass unicorn is literally just that Belly ran off to go look at these glass unicorns, right, when Conrad's supposed to be watching them, and he yells at her and she cries, and then for her birthday he buys her the big glass unicorn. Yes, it is nice that he noticed that she liked the unicorn. This isn't like a super romantic or sweet thing. Again, this is kind of just like giving something a well-meaning but like jerky older brother would do. Again, like the best thing you could say is like, yes, he observes, like he noticed that she would want the unicorn, just like at least in the book he noticed that she would like Junior Mint, but he did not go there for her. Again, he was kind of a jerk, and both of these things are kind of like I'm sorry gifts. And then in the same book we get a childhood flashback with Jeremiah, and this is the beloved sand crab flashback where Conrad and Steven go to rent a video game and they're like, if you don't come with us you can't play the video game, and Jeremiah chooses to stay with Belly. And she says that night Conrad and Steven played their new game. Jeremiah watched them and he didn't ask if he could play, and I could see how much he wanted to. But again, it's about spending time with her and choosing to be there with her, just like when she talks about their friendship, like when she talks about how they became best friends and why they're close. She talks about how they did things together and how they spent time together, right? Like Conrad and Steven decided to go night fishing, and Jeremiah loved night fishing, but he decided to stay with me instead. We watched TV and played cards, and we spent most of the summer doing that, just us. We'd collect shells and sand crabs, or go to the ice cream place, or the sleeping next to each other, or in the show the knocking on the walls, or the teaching her to drive. It's like spending time together. It's like being there with her, and I just don't get why I'm crazy for thinking that's the more appealing relationship. Conrad literally does not do this stuff. That's why I have to laugh when people say that Conrad and Belly are a friends to lovers ship, because when I tell you they are not friends like that, they don't spend time together until their situationship or relationship in the show. Like literally in the first book, Belly makes the distinction between the 2 of them by saying, Jeremiah, though, he was my friend. He was nice to me. He was the kind of boy who still hugged his mother, still wanted to hold her hand even when he was technically too old for it. Like she uses uses that to make a distinction. And that's why, like, I always have to laugh at the, like, it's Belly and Conrad's love story when, like, Jeremiah literally gets more airtime. They made the Conrad flashback sweeter in the show for sure. Like, in the book, this is not like this. Like, his mom makes him do it and it's, like, not like this. And there is no infinity pancake in the book. But even this, which I would say is, like, his nicest one, this isn't really, like, spending time with her or being friends with her. It's, like, doing a nice thing, which he does occasionally. But I'm crazy for preferring the I want to spend time with you and emotionally support you ship versus the I go to an Ivy League, I make my bed, and I will get you a gift if I'm mean to you ship. Like, that's not, I feel like I'm not crazy for that. And I'm gonna say this again because it's related. Conrad does not emotionally support Belly. I would still like you to give me an example of when Conrad emotionally supports Belly or comforts her, because we see Belly do that for him, but we do not see the reverse. It is much more reciprocal with Belly and Jeremiah, and if anything, Jeremiah does it more. And that is so important. That's so much more important than glass unicorns or consolation polar bears or Sour Patch Kids in the show, even though that, like, made no sense. Jeremiah is there for her and with her emotionally and physically, and he wants her to be and lets her be there with him, and that is important. I was told yesterday that Conrad meets Belly's needs better and pays more attention to her and who she is as a person. And in the past, when I've asked for receipts, I've gotten stuff like the show exclusive irrelevant Sour Patch Kids, which I think are irrelevant, and the fact that Conrad gave Belly a sweatshirt after Jeremiah noticed that she was cold and told him not to turn off the AC. Like, I don't know, or very vague, unbased statements about the books. And I'm not even gonna get into the books right now. I just think because of that, I should remind you all of something. Do you remember when Belly and Jeremiah had their cute little romantic excursion at Finch? And why did that happen? Because when they were in the car, Jeremiah said, I can show you around Finch. Didn't your guidance counselor say it was a possibility for you? And Belly was like, yeah, I can't believe you remembered. And then they have their cutesy little Finch date, right? And then what did Conrad do in the car? He made a very degrading dig at Finch when he said, I was going to get you one from Stanford, but Finch is fun. And when I brought that up in the past, people were like, well, he was saying it to Jeremiah, like as if that makes the sentiment better. But if you all remember during one of your precious phone calls where we saw Belly emotionally support and comfort Conrad, but never the reverse, she did tell him that a college scout from Finch was coming to watch her volleyball game. So he knew that Belly was considering Finch and was even excited about it, and then proceeded to degrade it later on in the car. So either Conrad doesn't really pay such close attention to the things Belly says and does as you all say he does, or perhaps he just doesn't care or respect her. I'm sorry, I can't get past this kind of stuff, and then I get told, like, oh, he respects her more, he meets her needs more, he pays more attention to her. Like, after this, really? I'm supposed to be rooting for her to get back with him? Like, no thanks, no thanks. You can say that he loves her deep down, even though he can't admit it to her face. His chest must be really tight because he never told her that he loved her. But I will say it again, he's not her friend, and he does not respect her. Why am I supposed to believe he respects her? You know the common sentiment among Conrad enthusiasts or Bonrad enthusiasts about how Conrad loves Belly in a very pure and unselfish way, and their love is like very pure, whereas Jeremiah and Belly's relationship is about Conrad, meaning like Jeremiah only likes Belly as a way to like compete with Conrad, or he likes to win something over Conrad, and Belly apparently likes Jeremiah because she can't have Conrad, right? And Conrad acts out of pure and unselfish love for both of them, but then somehow they got blindfolded and just like magically forgot about how Conrad only throws Belly a bone in season 1 after he says to Steven, who is Jeremiah hooking up with these days? Steven says, Shayla thinks he's hooking up with my sister, and then and only then he whipped out the phone and sent her that text. And then they'll still claim that somehow magically Conrad had no knowledge of Belly and Jeremiah, and he couldn't have had a clue, and it wasn't his fault. And then after he witnesses Belly get into the car with Jeremiah, after hearing that, he sends her this literal "you up" text. We can also talk about how, like, supposedly Jeremiah is evil for getting with Belly at the end of season 2, even after he talked to Conrad about it and gave them ample opportunity to get together. Apparently that's evil, but Conrad completely dismissing Jeremiah's feelings in the beginning of season 2, acting like he doesn't have them, and then steamrolling him into giving him his blessing, and then arriving to Belly and lying to her face about Jeremiah being over it and on a high. Apparently that was totally okay, and that's not the same situation, and Conrad and Belly are true love, so it doesn't count because Jeremiah's feelings are not as important. Also, since they love to talk about the books, apparently Conrad is also exempt from the whole I only confess feelings to this girl 2 days before she was supposed to marry my brother, and said pick me, choose me to my brother's fiance, even though I had never told her that I had feelings for her or loved her before that. Apparently that doesn't count, and that's not the same thing. If Mr. You Up texted your man, okay, but can you please stop insulting our intelligence because you're gonna look stupid. I really think there's no possibility for a different ending or even an open ending. Like, we don't know which brother Belly will finally choose. This is such a fair question, and I want to clarify something. I would not and cannot say that there is no possibility. There's a possibility, and nobody else can say that either, and that's why I know that I tend to be very realistic about season 3 or the fate of Jelly or Jeremiah in season 3. I would say, I'll be fair, I'm even a little bit pessimistic. But what does annoy me is how, like, smug Bonrads are about, like, she's not gonna change the end game, like, this is gonna happen, blah, blah, blah. And the truth is, they don't know any better than I do. They don't know any better than you do. I do not think the end game will change. I do not think it will be open-ended, and I will explain why. But I want to say that there are so many Jelly fans that are hopeful, and I don't want to take that hope away from you because, again, like, I have my reasons for why I feel the way I do, but I also admit that I am a little bit pessimistic, and I would love for you to be right and me to be wrong, and I will celebrate you if that happens. That said, I had a wonderful feeling about season 2. If you remember the early days, like my earliest videos about this series, I told you all when those first 3 episodes dropped, and even the promos, I said we are in for a wonderful time, and I think it's going to exceed our expectations, and I was right. As pessimistic as I can be, I knew season 2 would be great. That being said, I unfortunately believe that Jeremiah was probably handled with the most care that he will ever be handled with in season 2, and it is only going to go downhill from here. I do not believe that Bonrads are getting their play-by-play of We'll Always Have Summer like they're hoping for. That's not going to happen. However, I am not particularly excited for season 3, and I don't have very high hopes. I've never been an endgame truther. I have only passionately and with evidence argued that they are the better ship and that Jeremiah is the better love interest and that I love them more and that I think their love is more special and interesting and good. I believe they love each other more, and that is like not something that I'm willing to take back, and it's something I believe, but I unfortunately am very wary about the direction that the show will take. I think that a lot of the things that are set up in the show are purposely crafted so that you can interpret them either way. But I think if you take into consideration that she will, in all likelihood, end up back with Conrad, the show has really enforced a narrative that Jeremiah and Belly's relationship is something that is real and it's good and true, and maybe, actually, definitely, it's even better than what she has with Conrad in so many ways, but it's something that is ultimately temporary. And I certainly don't think that whatever they do with Conrad and Belly is going to be good or romantic because it's not a good ship, but that also makes me very wary for whatever they're going to do to them. I have huge beef with book 3. I don't hate book 3 Jeremiah. You know I am always defending him, and I always will. It just makes me very sad. I unfortunately feel like they might do him worse than they did in the books, and I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I've been here a while. I can see those patterns. I'm still going to love him, but ultimately I don't really have very high hopes at all. Now, if you do, this is not to crush your hopes. It is only me explaining why I feel the way I do, and I cannot have the same hope that you have. That being said, it'll always be them for me, and they could never make me hate my man, even though I'm so wary about what they're gonna do. Now, as far as it being open-ended and us not knowing who she ends up with or something like that, the only way I'd see that happening is if there were more than 3 seasons, and I could see one season ending that way, and then them continuing in the next season. And I used to be more hopeful about there being more than 3 seasons. Now I'm kind of thinking there won't be. And this comment actually came after a comment that said, like, Belly needs to date outside the family, and I said it's really just not that kind of show. What I meant by that is nothing to be rude or anything, just that the appeal of this show, the central focus of this show, is the brother love triangle. She's gonna get with both brothers, and she's gonna end up with one of them in the end, and that's really just what's gonna happen. Never really understood the, like, I'm team no one, she needs to be with neither of them. Not that I don't get the sentiment, but it's not that kind of show. Nobody would be watching it for that reason, And I do not see them not ending it on a romantic note, and I also do not see them not giving Bonrads the one-page endgame. Honestly, I don't. I could be wrong, though. I definitely could be wrong. I talk about my reaction if Jelly was endgame, like what would my reaction be? Honestly, I love this question. Nothing would shock me more than that. Like, nothing would surprise me or like throw me for a loop more than that. You know that I have pretty much no hope for a Jelly endgame, which is sad because, you know, I am such a Jelly warrior, as you all say. But truly, I would be flabbergasted, gobsmacked if that happened. And obviously, I would be elated. Like, you have no idea how elated I would be. I would take back everything I said. But the first thing I would do is I would give flowers to all of you who had hope for a Jelly endgame when I did not, and I would absolutely give you your credit and your flowers. Then I would take back everything I said, and I would formally forgive Jenny Han for all of her crimes in the books and the show thus far, even the really painful ones, because that would make up for it. But first, I would have to recover from a period of shock, and I'm not even kidding, because nothing would shock me more than that. Like, I don't feel like most of what will happen in season 3 will surprise me because my expectations are very low, but that would genuinely shock me. And could you imagine if we like got a scene of them running into the ocean as adults as well? And something I'm gonna say, after making running into the ocean and the ocean in general like a Jelly thing in the show, in the pilot episode, mind you, if we have to sit through the one-page Bonrad endgame and they put like them going into the ocean into, if we have to see a Bonrad version of this scene, that will be the most evil thing she does. That will be the most evil thing that the show writers or whoever does, that will be very evil. That's the kind of betrayal that like you don't come back from, and that's something I don't think that I could ever forgive. And that's kind of like why I wonder, like, how could they do that? If Bonrad's really getting their one-page endgame, they're not running into the ocean. If so, that I would never forgive. That would be worse than the Sour Patch Kids or anything else like that. All this to say that I would be absolutely elated if Jelly was endgame, but at first I would be very, very shocked. I'd actually probably be shocked about that for years. What are my thoughts on people saying that Janice took advantage of Katie to get back at Regina? So here's the thing, she kind of did, and I certainly never have, nor do I think anybody has ever claimed that Janice was innocent. I think, like I've always said, they could all be mean girls, right? And none of them were innocent, and there certainly is some truth to this. What I always was gobsmacked and confused by is the oversimplification or perhaps over-exaggeration of the Janice-Katie situation that is used in these very weird takes that I've seen in recent years that attempt to paint Janice as the villain of Mean Girls, insinuating that she was just as bad or even more absurdly worse than Regina, and that is just like factually incorrect. Janice for sure sees an opportunity with Katie and eventually takes it, but her motives are not nearly as singularly cruel or inherently calculated as they are made out to be, nor are they nefarious with Katie. Two things can be true at once, and Janice genuinely does care about Katie, and that cannot be said of Regina. That is the main difference, right? Janice cares about Damien, she cares about Katie. Janice is not a school-wide homophobic bully. People don't walk around saying, I was victimized by Janice Ian, right? So focusing on the 2004 film, originally, Janice's motivations with Katie are just to befriend her. Janice and Damien are like, hey, new girl, don't sit in the bathroom, sit with us, and they want to hang out with her, right? And there is absolutely no indication that Janice seeks out Katie to take revenge on Regina. That actually doesn't make sense, because we see when Katie is first approached by the plastics, Janice is like, what are you doing? Come sit over here. She warns her prior, stay away from those girls, right? Then when Katie is like, they asked me to sit with her, Janice convinces her, oh, we'll listen to what they say, right? She absolutely does that. Katie gets further involved with the plastics because she wants to and because she's interested in Aaron. Janice continues to be friends with her and doesn't introduce the idea of the revenge party until after Regina betrays Katie with Aaron. And at this point, Katie is totally on board with the whole thing. Is she influenced by Janice? Yes, of course. But Janice's plot against Regina, well, it certainly was not entirely good or right in any way, and she definitely took it too far. It's entirely different than anything that Regina did, because Janice is acting out of retaliation for not only herself, but also Katie, and also the entire school and everybody in the surrounding area, because Regina is a nasty, self-serving, school-wide bully who victimizes everyone. And she's trying to knock a bully off their pedestal and remove their power. So while you can certainly say that Janice influenced Katie, and you can make an argument about how Katie was initially naive and unaware and easily influenced, and she admits to this, while being her friend at the same time, both of those things can be true. Janice is certainly not responsible for all of Katie's actions. As we see as the film goes on, Katie keeps going long past the point where Janice is over it and is like, okay, so what's the point now? Let's just hang out. And I think it's very clear by the time that Janice is calling Katie out and saying, it's not pretend anymore, you're plastic, when she lies to her and when she says, it's not my fault, you're like in love with me, that Katie knows what she's doing at that point. It's also not to say that Katie doesn't care about Janice or that everything was Katie's fault, because it wasn't. But what is truly absurd is to act like A, Janice paints herself as a victim when she was a victim, or B, she is equal to or even worse than Regina, or C, that she is responsible for all of Katie's behavior. Because all of those things, like, I think we truly lost the plot of the movie if we're saying. I'm gonna keep this brief because I have talked about this a lot in more detail, but I do have something to say about the Silly Summer program, the Silly Summer series. The talking point that The Summer I Turned Pretty is not a love triangle, but Belly and Conrad's love story, and why this is one of their most annoying and stupid talking points. Quickly, number one, because that is just factually incorrect. It is absolutely a love triangle, and we do not lack comprehension. We are not crazy or stupid for picking a side in a story that was literally deliberately written and marketed so that people picked sides. In addition, I can never really find a way to reconcile that it is Belly and Conrad's love story when Jeremiah literally gets more airtime than him. It is absolutely a love triangle. The books are written, the show is written and produced and marketed so that you pick one or the other, right? But in the books, we never actually even see Belly and Conrad in a relationship. She has this long-standing friendship with Jeremiah, and they are together romantically for 2 years. Conrad, it's crickets. She has an unrequited crush. They are not friends. They don't spend time alone together ever. They have a 6-month situationship, and that's it. She literally tells Conrad that he treats her poorly, picks Jeremiah at the end, and then their whole getting together is skipped over with a time jump to the one-page endgame, and those infamous letters were added after the fact, meaning they were not even originally part of the books. You should see the original copies. They don't have the letters in them. But the point is, I think why this annoys me so much in regards to this particular series is because it tends to go hand in hand with those people who spin the narratives about how Jeremiah is actually evil and lurking and a manipulative border collie or whatever, and if we're not picking up on the signs that Jeremiah is actually a wolf in sheep's clothing or whatever it is they say, we're stupid and we're watching the show with our eyes closed. And that is just so funny to me, because I promise you that even though Belly ended up with Conrad in the books, Jeremiah is not, never was, written to be some nefarious villain, narcissist, or psychological manipulator. Yes, he has layers. Yes, he is more than just the sunshine boy. He is more than just a silly frat boy. Absolutely. I promise you, he was not written to be a manipulative border collie who's taking from Belly, or Wickham from Pride and Prejudice, or whatever it is. Like, I promise you that is not what Jeremiah is, and he was not intended to be that. Most of the symbolism in the series is intentionally crafted in a way and left ambiguous so that it can be interpreted in one way or the other. Like this scene, I could really go off about this, but I promise you, we are not stupid because we don't like Conrad regardless of symbolism, but I also promised you that the symbolism is not always in your favor. It's intentionally left ambiguous. Like, we're not stupid for interpreting it another way. It was written so that we would. So this infamous scene from the season 2 finale of The Summer I Turned Pretty, where Belly's laying in the motel bed and Conrad's on one side and Jeremiah's on the other, and there's like different lighting and details on each side. So the number one thing I want to say about this is that this scene is intentionally crafted to spark debate and so that people talk about it. That's what most of the symbolism in the series is intended to do, because despite what Conrad enthusiasts like to say, this is a love triangle. It is intentionally written and crafted so that you pick a side and so that people interpret it in different ways. I will say that I find the Jeremiah positive interpretations to be much more meaningful and thoughtful because they are supported by action. But the Bonrad theory about it is that supposedly Conrad is like the sun and daylight because the artificial light from the motel bathroom or whatever is shining on him. And yeah, I do think that that was intentionally done that way so that his stands would interpret it that way, or even more absurdly, like a light and dark narrative, as if like Jeremiah is like a dark force and Conrad is a light one, which is just so funny and absurd. And then on the Jeremiah side of things, I've seen so many lovely and thoughtful interpretations, and of course I agree with a lot of them and I have my own, and I'm gonna tag had one from this particular creator that you might have seen that was like so thoughtful. But a big one is this theme about shadows and how Belly's shadow is facing him. And they're in the same position, potentially indicating this very supported theme about their love or their togetherness shining even in darkness or even in the shadows. And that's very supported by actions and other symbolism in the show. Like we have the line in EXO, which was used for their finale kiss, "Your love is bright as ever, even in the shadows." And then we had this lovely scene early in the season where they were connecting emotionally and starting to connect romantically again, and they were playing shadow puppets. And I do love that, of course, and I think that makes all the sense in the world because there is definitely this theme throughout their relationship, and this is very present in the books too, that they lean on each other and support each other. And that's something they're able to do even when things are not perfect, even when it's dark. They are light and love for each other, right? And I'd say that's definitely a contrast to the sort of when the going gets tough, Conrad gets going thing that we've seen, and the complete lack of emotional support on his end. And then of course, people like to point out that this side of the bed is like messier and the nightstand is messier because like Jeremiah is messy. Belly is literally messy too. So, and then obviously Belly wakes up and makes a very deliberate choice to be with Jeremiah, and they go outside, and when they kiss and everything, it's in direct natural sunlight. So I think this like narrative that like Conrad is light and Jeremiah is dark is a little silly in consideration of what actually happened. Also, perhaps interesting to note is that most of their significant scenes in season 2 take place in direct natural sunlight, like the tire scene when they're hanging around Finch. And of course this. A lot of Conrad's scenes are in overcast, or it's raining at prom, or whatever it is, right? And Conrad is literally described as like a doom cloud. He's not sunshine or anything like that. But how Bonrads like to counter that is that for Belly, Conrad is the sun. Apparently what proves that is that Laurel says it in season 1, and she says for Belly, Conrad is the sun, and when the sun comes out, the stars disappear. So I suppose that's supposed to mean that Conrad is the sun in that like her world revolves around him and everything falls away. And I personally do not find that to be romantic, number one, nor do I find bathroom light shining on him or Laurel saying this to be a good enough indication that he is that with nothing in his actual actions to earn that. And then another thing, I do think this whole like sun and stars thing was added particularly in the show to spark debate again, because you can see how they post it on socials, and it really is very convoluted because there was no narrative about Conrad being the sun in the books. Don't let anybody gaslight you. That did not exist in the books. Jeremiah was the one with the sun metaphors and the sunshine in the books entirely, and Conrad was very much associated with the stars. And then people will say, well, no, Jeremiah is supposed to be the stars because he shines in the dark times, which like, yes, I can see that, but then also because when Conrad comes out, Jeremiah disappears. To that, I'd say that's certainly not concrete because Jeremiah has all the sunshine, daylight, golden narratives, even in the show as well. And Belly and Conrad are always talking about the stars. You know, he gave her the moon and the stars, infinity. Didn't have the flowers or candy, but he had that. So he gave her Jeremiah. They spend so much of their relationship talking about Jeremiah. Okay. And again, I would say that is all to annoy people and spark debate, and so that we talk about it. But my take is the Jeremiah ones are much more meaningful, much more interesting, and much more thoughtful because they are supported by action. You all need to stop saying that they're going to use Lacey by Olivia Rodrigo for season 3 because of Lacey Barone. Number one, because that would be insulting and a corny misuse of the song Lacey. It actually would not fit unless Lacey was an entirely different character or plotline. And number 3, because Lacey might not even be a character at all on the show. And here's some truths that a lot of you need to hear. Even if they carry on with that cheating plot with Jeremiah in season 3, Lacey might not even be a character. It might be something different than that. But more than that, all of you salivating over that are so weird. Because first of all, again, Jeremiah did not cheat on Belly. They were explicitly broken up. We've established this. You cannot cheat on somebody that you're explicitly broken up with. But again, they made the decision to make Jeremiah bi in the show, which was a change from the books, and then heavily leaned into this promiscuous thing with him and had multiple other characters shame him for it, even though he didn't do anything wrong, to the point where viewers also counted against him. And then if they were to double down even further by slapping him with the promiscuous bi cheater stereotype, it's like, why? Especially because the cheating thing would be anticlimactic with all the cheating and cheating adjacent things that have already happened in the show, and the fact that Jeremiah is the only character that hasn't had some kind of cheating or cheating adjacent thing in his past. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm gonna be so real, even if show Jeremiah was portrayed exactly as book 3 Jeremiah is, and book 3 was a direct copy of what season 3 is, he would still be the most sympathetic character by far. I still would not be Team Conrad. We still would not hate Jeremiah. And Conrad would still be an absolute flop of a love interest. And I know the reason that you're all salivating over, oh, Jeremiah's going to cheat on Belly, even though he literally didn't even cheat on Belly in the book, is because Conrad, at the end of the day, does not hold a candle to Jeremiah in terms of who is a better love interest for Belly. And you need something to knock him down so your man can look halfway decent. And that's exactly how it was in the books. Spoiler alert, didn't work. So all of you saying, oh my gosh, just wait for season 3, they're going to use Lacey. Number 1, that's corny. But number 2, we've read book 3. We are still Team Jeremiah. Even though I very much do believe he was done dirty in that book, and I believe Jelly was done really dirty in that book, he is still the most sympathetic character. He is still the better option, and we still do not hate Jeremiah after book 3. I actually want to start a defense series for book 3 Jeremiah specifically. Like Jeremiah in general, yes, but I've already kind of done this because the arguments I see and the criticisms about book 3 Jeremiah are actually, upon examination, profoundly stupid. And that's not to say that Jeremiah never did anything wrong or was perfect or that none of his actions were ever at fault, but the way that Conrad is allowed to act crazy throughout all 3 books, and even Belly is allowed to act crazy too, but Jeremiah never even screwed up like that until the last book, and Belly herself said it was the first time he had ever disappointed me. And the stuff that he gets criticized for isn't even criticized correctly, like it's just misconstrued, and most of it is really stupid. Like literally, like he had allergies and then Conrad is supposed to be forgiven because he like folded a sheet and made grilled chicken. This is coming from somebody who, like, I love Jelly so much. I really truly do. Yes, book 3 Belly makes me want to throw pine cones at the ground. Yes, that's my OTP. Yes, we exist and it's complex, but I have little hope of a Jelly endgame, and I have not that much hope in them not doing Jeremiah really dirty. But I'm here to tell you, like, even if they did exactly what they did in book 3, which again would be dirty for quite a few reasons, especially considering that they removed or softened like all of Conrad's worst behavior, but whatever, even if they did that, even if book 3 Jer is on screen, as little sense as that would make, I would still support him. I absolutely would, and I'm not taking it back, and I will take you up on every point. So stop bringing up Lacey as if it's going to send me into orbit, and that would be a really corny and lame song choice. And also, I'm going to say it, I originally criticized it, but I actually like the use of Snow on the Beach later in the season at the party. I think it was very tasteful and interesting, as opposed to how on the nose it would have been when they were on the beach. I am so tired of this comment, actually. It comes up so often, so I think I'm just going to address it. When we pull the receipts that objectively prove that Jeremiah did not cheat on Belly, that's not what cheating is, and there's just no way you can call it cheating. Some people think they're being girl bosses by saying, well, it was Belly's relationship and she can say it's cheating. No, Belly said herself they were broken up. Belly's not God Almighty. She doesn't get to change the narrative after the fact because her feelings are hurt. And then once that is objectively proven, because that's just the facts, the goalpost gets moved and we get something like this. You can say he didn't cheat, but if he truly loved Belly, then he wouldn't do that days after they broke up. And this is just so silly. Jeremiah had rebound segs. That's what happened. I don't know why, like, people act like we're supposed to cower in fear when Lacey Barone's name is mentioned, when most of us don't care. Hooking up with someone else after you break up does not mean that you don't love your ex. That is not how people work. That is actually an extremely common response to heartbreak or being distraught or rejection or just having a breakup in general. And no, we do not hate Jeremiah because he had a rebound after Belly had been lying to him, belittled and berated him, threw his insecurities in his face, and destroyed his self-esteem for no reason. Like, we don't hate him for that. We're not afraid of that. The fact that that's his big screw up after 3 books when Conrad was acting crazy the whole time. And that's the other thing. For people who will bend over backwards explaining why Conrad's demonstrated consistent trash behavior is totally acceptable, explainable, and oh, well, because he was grieving and you have to understand like how he grew up and that's like how he thinks it, like you give none of that to Jeremiah. Since we're talking about something that exclusively happened in the books, I could use a book example and say, well, if Conrad really loved Belly, maybe he wouldn't have grabbed her and shook her. If Conrad really loved Belly, maybe he wouldn't have called her a mistake. If Conrad really loved Belly, maybe he wouldn't have jerked her around emotionally for 3 books. And maybe Jeremiah was thinking, if Belly really loved me, maybe she wouldn't have been lying to me or said all those vile, awful things to me when I never said anything like that to her. This is just such a dumb, unnuanced, hypocritical comment, and I'm over it.
It's not just that they tried to convince us that this was an overweight woman in 2001. It's the fact that Renee Zellweger was one of the thinnest working actresses of the time, and so much of the advertising for this film was about how she had to gain 30 pounds to play this role. I was thinking about Bridget Jones's Diary the other day and the way that it impacted me as a kid. And obviously I love this movie, and I think that it's the intent of both the original author and the film to like make fun of the insane obsessive diet culture of the time. I mean, obviously Bridget Jones ends up being like fought over by these 2 insanely hot guys. Like her being like not incredibly thin was never the problem that she thought it was and obsessed over. And I think that's the point. However, the point that they're making is so severely undercut by hiring an extremely thin actress who is already significantly underweight and having so much of the marketing of the film be about how she had to gain 30 pounds to play this role. And then, of course, she lost it immediately after. Like, I really wonder what the extent of the positive impact could have been at such a crucial moment if they'd actually hired an actress who was a size 6, who was 130 pounds. Because for me, a kid watching this movie, seeing an actress that just was beautiful at that weight and was being fought over by these men and showed up at the premiere looking the way she did in the movie, like I can't help but feel like that could have possibly had such a huge meaningful impact. And obviously that was never going to happen in 2001. It's questionable if it would even happen today. I mean, there are still actors like putting on weight and wearing prosthetics to look like regular people for roles. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting how frequently this happens with Hollywood movies, where the story is so clearly trying to comment on something, but in the execution of telling that story, they can't help but reaffirm the thing that they're trying to comment on.
Honestly, I'm grateful that you've lived such a privileged life that your answer is the bear.
Thank you. Oh my God, it has been so infuriating the past few days to log onto this app and see the amount of women that refuse to acknowledge their privilege of never having been mauled by bears. And frankly, like, it's been really difficult because I'm one of the only women I know that daily puts into work to unpack what my level of privilege as someone who's never been attacked by a bear grants me. It's like, it's a lot of work, but it's obviously work that I'm honored to do. I'm not saying it makes me like a better person or anything, but like, I mean, a lot of people have told me that, but it's just like so uninformed and insensitive and like indicative of your privilege if you're willing to get on this app as a woman and say that you'd rather be alone in the woods with a bear than a man. Like, it doesn't matter how many tens of thousands of women are killed by men every single year and like the millions more that are like assaulted and abused by them, because like, have you ever even thought of the less than 1 person a year that gets murdered by a bear every single year? No, you obviously haven't, because you haven't thought about your privilege at all as someone who's never been attacked by a bear. And like, I am not the kind of person who quantifies trauma. Like, sure, it's just like one person who like is in the wrong place at the wrong time and like finds themselves face to face with like an angry bear, like that's just like, what are the odds, you know, versus the like literally millions of women who are systemically like face violent abuse and murder and whatever. Like, I mean, it's just, it shows how insensitive you are that you would even think that like one of those things is a more serious issue than the other one. I can't, if you don't already know that, then I can't explain it to you, obviously. And you know what, before you even say it, I would say the exact same thing if I was talking about shark attacks. So don't even, okay? Like, there are like dozens of people throughout history, probably, that have survived bear attacks. And I hold space for that trauma. Like, I think it's just like, it's really telling and really indicative of your like non-bear attack survivor privilege. We're working on the nomenclature. I know it's like a mouthful. It's But basically what I'm getting at is like, this is such an important video, and thank God we have men like you. I mean, like, thank God your mom, I mean, not thank God she was attacked by that bear, but like, thank God that like all of the things happened so that even though you don't have like actual experience navigating life as a woman and like just existing in a world that's like constantly threatening to you, that you would like be able to contextualize this for women, so that we don't have to form our own opinions and we can just shut our whore mouths. And you know, like, it's just, I would never say that I would rather be in the woods with a bear than a man. Frankly, I would never have an opinion unless a man told me to, and then I would have his opinion. But you're so right. And it's like, it's the privilege, the unchecked privilege from women who've never been attacked by bears. It's disgusting. And like, you're so right to call it out. It feels like this movie is a direct response to anti-sex scene discourse, and frankly, it couldn't come soon enough. I'm not going to be the only person to tell you that Challengers is an incredible film. It is fantastically made. It's beautiful. It's thrilling. It's sexy. It's fun. I cannot wait to see it again in theaters. Like, it was a 10 out of 10 theatrical experience. But what I really can't stop thinking about is the cultural shift that this film really seems to represent. Because in the past couple of years, we've had a really good run of films that are genuinely sexy and horny, of storytellers that have really embraced eroticism as a method of storytelling, with films like All of Us Strangers and Love Lies Bleeding and Saltburn and Sanctuary, and like there's actually genuinely been a very good run. And as soon as I got out of the theater from seeing Challengers, I had to look up this article again about the MCU. Everyone is beautiful and no one is horny. This idea that the MCU specifically, and the popularity of this specific kind of blockbuster that was meant to be appealing to all audiences and was supposed to have this kind of general, beautiful, vague sexiness to it, but had to omit all sensuality, kind of created, I think, this anti-sex scene discourse, and this idea that a lot of people have, that sex scenes are never necessary for the plot and are inherently exploitative. This kind of like puritanical ideology embracing beauty for beauty's sake, but not for like the actual passion that's behind it. And what's been really beautiful about this recent string of explicitly erotic films is that, like, sex is a part of the story. It's a storytelling device. It's a reminder that this is a normal part of human existence and relationships. And honestly, Challengers is the perfect example, because this film is the actual embodiment of passion and the frustration that you feel when you lose it. I mean, every single second, every frame of this film is utilized in telling you something about every character. Every touch, every glance, every moment is informative and purposeful. And honestly, I feel like art like this is so important to remind us that we are human. We are animals, and we are driven by passion and urges that even we don't fully understand sometimes. We live in a world that is increasingly compartmentalized, and we have access to so many different kinds of people, but there's this like veil of professionalism and formality between us in so many of our relationships these days. And I feel like films like this are just such a good reminder that it's okay to be a person sometimes. And honestly, I think that's really what this film is about, is that the point of being alive is to live. And when you lose sight of the things that give you passion and purpose, like what is it even for? Also, it's very hot people doing kissing, and that's also really important and what life is about. So in conclusion, I absolutely love Challengers, and I'm thrilled to see the pendulum swinging away from like that sterile sexlessness that's become the norm. I do think this movie is absolutely gorgeous, and I recommend seeing it on the biggest screen possible. This film is like an immersive experience, and I think seeing it in Dolby or IMAX is absolutely worth it if you can. But see Challengers, you're gonna want to see it again. It rules. Based on the way the film was marketed and the early reactions to Challengers, I went into this film expecting Tashi Duncan to be an incredibly manipulative and devious but super fun femme fatale. You know, her pulling the strings behind the scenes intentionally and toying with these men's emotions just for fun. I was completely shocked to find that she's actually an incredibly tragic figure. I think it's incredibly relevant that everything we learn about these characters, every moment we spend with them, is framed through the lens of their relationships with each other. We only learned anything about Tashi's family or Patrick's background through casual conversations these characters have with each other. They never have any meaningful interactions with anyone other than each other. And it's because of that framework that we can't take anything that happens in this film at face value. These are all people projecting the best version of themselves, the version that they want to be, to people that they have very intimate and emotional relationships with. Tashi is a character that is introduced to Art and Patrick already on a pedestal. She's this unattainable, almost inhuman goddess that is not a person to them, but a fantasy. But that's not and never been who Tashi is. Tashi, in reality, is just an 18-year-old girl, an 18-year-old black girl nonetheless, who's been told that she has a gift and it is her immense responsibility to nurture that gift so that she can change her and her entire family's life. And it seems to me that Tashi's determination to present herself as very stern and unrelenting is a defense mechanism, because she's very aware of the power structures that are normally at play. And if she cedes any power to people like Art and Patrick, they could very quickly start trying to walk all over her. That's why I absolutely agree with Zendaya herself's interpretation that Art is the sneakiest, most backhanded motherfucker in this movie. That's not to say that I think that any of the characters are particularly morally dubious. I think they're all hurt people hurting other people, and all of their actions are reactive instead of being like necessarily aggressive, with the exception of maybe Art, but still. And I think when you start investigating the reasons why Patrick and Art both became with Tashi, like, it becomes very clear that there's more going on beneath the surface. The entire reason why Art even went to that party, went to that game, is because Patrick told him that Tashi Duncan was the hottest woman he'd ever seen. The very beginning of his interest in Tashi was because Patrick was interested in her. And so when people say things like Art really loved Tashi, Tashi really loved tennis, and Patrick really loved Art, I think it's missing the point. Because I think the whole point is how deeply interwoven these people's need for each other and tennis became. Especially when you consider the homoeroticism in this movie and what that means for Art and Patrick's relationship and their relationship to Tashi. Because in so many of those early scenes before Patrick wins Tashi's phone number in that match and they like officially start dating, Patrick is like much more enthusiastic about reacting to any opportunity that Tashi gives him. He's the first to jump up on that bed. He offers up the story that they tell in the hotel room. He is very aggressive in like being clear that he is pursuing her. In reality, I think there's a few things happening here. I think both of these men are projecting this kind of manic pixie dream girl like fantasy version of a person who is going to make each of them better in their own individual ways. And I also think that Tashi is an acceptable outlet for a lot of these like pent up feelings that they've been having for each other for a while. And I think the fact that Art is more aggressive in pursuing it, Patrick is more aggressive in pursuing it than Art, is indicative of the fact that Patrick is more realized in his sexuality as a queer man, much more than Art is, who is not yet willing to accept that part of himself. And I think that's one of the main reasons why Art ends up taking it so hard when Patrick and Tashi get together. I mean, like he says in the tennis match, I just don't want to be left out. I feel like he feels like he missed out on like the Tashi of it all, but he also feels like, you know, he's jealous of the fact that Tashi gets to be with Patrick in a fully realized way. And that is why Art pulls some sneaky shit. He is the first person to take Tashi out to lunch and say, I don't think Patrick loves you. I think he might be sleeping with other women. I'm just saying this to protect you. And then he talks to Art and says, I don't think she's taking it seriously. That's the entire reason why they have the fight. Like, I can't imagine if one of your friends did this shit and then she goes and plays this match after they have this terrible fight, which I'll get more into in a minute. And then when Art is there, when she gets hurt, he says, get the fuck out to Patrick when he comes to the room. Imagine if your best friend was with your girlfriend when something like this happened. And instead of saying, hey man, he really loves you, listen to him, like at least listen to him. He was like, no, actually, do you want to go out for drinks later? Like, that is some snake shit. And I genuinely believed that Patrick and Tashi loved each other. I also believe that Patrick genuinely loved Art, and I think it hurt him doubly so to see Art throwing him out and betraying him just as much as it hurt him to see him losing Tashi when she got injured. And the fight scene in the dorm room is so hot, and I love Tashi saying, you're not in my fan club, and I think a lot of people read that as Tashi's arrogance coming to play, and she and Patrick being too similar, too arrogant to really get along with each other. But I think that that is a really beautiful depiction of Tashi's vulnerability. In this film, Tashi only relates to people through tennis. That is how she forms her connections with both Art and Patrick. And like I said, we don't see her have any connections outside of these two in this movie. We see her mother and her child, and there's almost no scenes that portray any kind of relationship with them at all, because it's unimportant, because the love language of this film is tennis. When Tashi and Patrick are making out in the dorm room and Patrick does not want to talk about the tour, Tashi is feeling insecure. She's asking him about the tour because Art just told her that he might be sleeping with other girls on this tour, and he's trying to brush off the questions. When he's refusing to engage with her about any kind of tennis talk, she sees that as a rejection of herself. When she asks Patrick, so you're not a member of my fan club, she is desperately trying to reclaim that feeling that she felt the first night that he met her, when she was a person that he would do anything to be with. And I guarantee you it's because in that moment she's hearing Art's voice in her head saying he doesn't love you. Tashi has structured her entire life around tennis, so of course she would structure her entire way of looking at relationships around tennis. Just like she says later in the movie about how a tennis match is having to be in love with someone, having to have this intimate relationship back and forth and trust with someone. That's what she wants, but she also wants to win, and that's how she sees love. And Patrick walking out of that dorm room is the first time her entire perception of reality shatters, because in her mind, she won that fight. She won that match, but he still walked away. She still lost him. And that is reflected later on when she loses the match, when she loses everything, and her entire world comes crumbling down. And Tashi as a character throughout the film remains like very restrained. She does not like to show emotions. And when she does, it oftentimes leads to questionable decision making. But I think definitively Tashi is a very different character before her accident and after. And I think it's not a coincidence that that coincides with Tashi before breaking up with Patrick and after. Two things that emotionally devastated her, but only one that she could outwardly process. I'm sorry to Patrick haters, but Patrick Zweig is the heart of this movie and the entire reason why Tashi and Art are a thing. Stay with me, listen. These are two of the most important scenes of the movie, and I think it's absolutely crucial that they center around Patrick. The entire film is about the importance of passion and purpose in life, and Patrick is the passion. I think it's really interesting that we don't know a whole lot about Patrick other than his context and relationships to these two. He has a very kind of orbital role in this film where he kind of comes in and out of their lives, and they really do seem to be the center of his universe. His universe seems to be not very bright outside of them. I also think it's interesting that a lot of people assume that Patrick didn't have any real feelings for Tashi, but the only person who ever says that is Art, who is Patrick's romantic competitor. And I honestly have a lot of sympathy for Patrick. We are shown explicitly how genuine and authentic and caring he is in his relationship with Art. He truly loves him. And we are shown absolutely no evidence that he is the boyfriend to Tashi that Art suggests consistently that he is. The only person in this movie that says that Patrick doesn't love Tashi is Art. And it's obviously very intentional because the use of perspective and time in this movie is masterfully done to weave this kind of mystery and uncertainty and ambiguity in terms of who's actually in the right. But I think it's a little bit of a shame that we don't get to see any of Patrick's perspective after he's thrown out by Tashi and Art. Like, that has to be an incredibly low point for him. And we see that his life does not seem to get any better after that point. And I think the reason why both Art and Tashi so violently push Patrick out of their lives is because he forces them to confront parts of themselves that they are not yet comfortable with. And it honestly makes sense that Tashi would have such an extreme reaction because she, after her injury, is at the lowest point in her life. This is recalibrating her life in a way that she could never have accounted for. She structured her entire life, her entire identity around being a tennis prodigy. So when that is so horrifically stripped from her, it's absolutely normal that she would have a very extreme reaction. But from Patrick's perspective, it's, I think, also really, really tragic. Not as tragic, but still really tragic. He's a guy who got into a fight with his girlfriend and she hurt his feelings. Like, they had a real fight that made him feel unimportant to her, that made him feel like she didn't actually care about him, that made him feel like she just wanted a fan and not someone to actually love her, to actually care about her, which again, after the Art conversation of him telling her, I don't think she's taking it seriously, absolutely got into his head. And it's normal that like you wouldn't go to your partner's little college match because you're frustrated with them. But he ran to her side after, and ordinarily just not happening to be there for something like this happening shouldn't be like a relationship ending offense. But because he was too emotional to get over it and just go support her and be the fan that she insinuated was all he was to her, he's thrust out of her life and Art's life. And the truth is, Patrick never treated Tashi like an idea, like a concept, like a golden idol, like Art did. Patrick was never going to let Tashi get away with treating him like shit just because she was special. And that was something that Tashi needed to confront. That was something that in her youth, Tashi could have grown from and become a better person, become a more like fully self-actualized adult. But because she was able to push Patrick away, and because Art slid into her life and said, I will let you play the fantasy. You can be my goddess. You can be my queen. You can boss me around. You can be the star that you were always meant to be to the public, to me, to your husband. That's not a healthy relationship. That is enabling, manipulative, like not normal. And similarly, Patrick and Art's relationship was structured the same way. Patrick and Art always had this underlying tension, this unspoken desire, and they were also like perfectly matched, perfect opposites on the court. They were coined fire and ice. Like, as the film so expertly uses tennis as a metaphor for sex, like these two had something on the court that Art was never able to recapture with anyone else. But Art, instead of taking any opportunity to confront the underlying nature of his relationship with Patrick, took the first opportunity to get him out of his life and stop being forced to confront that part of himself. And as a consequence, Tashi and Art found consolation prizes in each other, and they found people who would allow them to run from their insecurities and run from the parts of themselves that they didn't want to confront and enable each other's worst habits. Art tries to become like the tennis prodigy that Tashi was always meant to be so that Tashi could live through him, and Tashi tries to give him the perfect wife and family so that he can feel like confident in his identity. Very quickly, the passion and the purpose drains from their life until Patrick shows up to remind them like how they can feel, how life can make them feel. I know there have been a lot of complaints about the fact that like this movie doesn't dwell on these moments of like uncertainty, like Tashi's moment under the tree after her injury, which even though we all knew it was coming from the trailers, was still an absolutely devastating moment to have to confront. Like that is such a horrifying thing to see ripped from a person, like an entire life built around being a tennis prodigy, truly being special, and then having it all ripped away is something horrifying to see. But I think that Art and Patrick's stories have their own tragedies as well that we're similarly not allowed to dwell on, because the point of the movie is not dwelling in these moments, it's finding a way through. Art was always going to try to let Tashi live her dreams through him, but that's never going to be satisfying to Tashi. Tashi has to find a way to create a new identity for herself post-injury, which is a very difficult, devastating, hard thing to do, but it's the only way to live a fully satisfied life. She can never win the championships that Art would win for her. And that's why they need Patrick, to bring them back to reality and help them find their passion in every single way. Many, many different ways. Over and over again. Art Donaldson Defenders, this video is for you because it's time to talk about baby girl over there. And people think that I seem to have a problem with Art just because I think he's a manipulative little shit. I love Art. Let me be clear. I love Art because he's exactly who I thought Tashi was going to be. Art is a devious little mastermind and I love him for it, but I think he also has very complex and nuanced motivations. Art's whole thing is carefully manipulating people's perception of him as some sweet, timid, harmless guy, and he loves getting people to take care of him so that they feel powerful and in control. It's interesting because they say that the way to get people to like you is not to do favors for them, but to get them to do favors for you, and I think that's Art's whole thing. The parallels of spitting the gum into people's hands is a perfect example of this, because he conditions both Tashi and Art to think that they are the ones that are his teacher, like they are the ones that are helping him, guiding him, and taking care of him. But the thing is, I think Art genuinely buys into his own game. I think he has very deep-seated insecurity, and I think that a lot of his motivation for pursuing Tashi in the way that he did, in a really sneaky and backhanded way, is because of his inability to confront his queer romantic feelings towards Patrick. I think Art's big struggle is every bisexual struggle, which is when you fall in love with someone not being able to exactly tell if you love them or you want to be them. And I think Art is very jealous of Patrick's persona from the first day that he meets him. He's jealous of his confidence, he's jealous of his talent, he's jealous of the fact that he doesn't seem to care, that none of it feels as important to him as it does to Art, because I think Art really wants to be liked. More than being successful, I think he wants to be successful to be liked. And I think even though we see like glimpses of Art's subtle manipulation before he meets Tashi, like in trying to convince Patrick to let him win the match the next day because it'll mean more to him and his grandmother's sick and whatever reasoning that he has, I think he starts having much more conflicted feelings about himself and about Patrick once Tashi enters the picture. I think seeing Tashi and Patrick together is particularly difficult for him because it's like the first time that he's realizing the complexity of his feelings towards Patrick. I think it's really confusing and upsetting for him to realize that he's not just jealous of Tashi. And I mentioned this in an earlier video, but one of the first things he says when he's asking them about the early days of their relationship is, I just don't want to feel left out. And I feel like so much of Art's conflict is feeling like he doesn't know his own place in the world. And I think the buildup of those feelings is what causes him to start more aggressively pulling strings behind the scenes and starting to plant seeds of doubt with both Patrick and Tashi. And I mean, yes, both Patrick and Tashi are very outwardly confident. So when he starts, putting these things in their mind, like, oh, he doesn't love you, she's not serious about you, they're both going to outwardly dismiss it. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect them. Like, of course it does. And honestly, I think Art's determination to be with Tashi, to track her down all those years later, is because he thinks that being with Tashi will say something about him. I think that his obsession with her is because he views her as an idea more than a person. I'm not saying he doesn't love her. I think he absolutely loves and admires her. I genuinely think what Art loved the most about tennis was the ability it gave him to get close to people who had this intense passion for it. Because I think his own inability to confront his entire self, his entire identity, and live comfortably with who he is, prevented him from feeling that kind of passion about tennis specifically. And obviously the film uses tennis as a metaphor for love and sex and intimacy and connection. I feel like a lot of their relationship as it's presented felt to me like Tashi seemed trapped and miserable, like chasing this shitty consolation, like runner-up version of what she thought was her destiny, where she's trying to coach Art to victory and he doesn't even give a shit. And I honestly think that, like, Art really did think he was helping her, but by refusing to challenge her because he also never wanted to challenge himself, like, all he was really doing was holding her back, and again, limiting his own ability to experience his life to the fullest by refusing to confront his entire identity. And of course, I think Tashi is manipulative too in her own ways. The only reason why I don't think Patrick is particularly manipulative is because I think he's too much of a outwardly messy bitch, and I don't think he's really all that capable of hiding his motivation and feelings and, you know, relatable. But I think Tashi's form of manipulation is a lot more goal-oriented and very internalized. Like, I think this moment is also really hard for Tashi, not because, like, you know, she's sad that their marriage is ending potentially. I mean, I think she is sad about the complicated feelings that she's having here, but I also think that she views this as a rejection of her. Art came to her initially because he said, I want to win and only you can make me win, and she didn't succeed in that. That was something that she failed at. And I think the part of Art that she's distancing herself from here is the part that she recognizes in herself as being a failure. I think it's really, really difficult for her to reconcile the fact that she lost her chance and she failed at her opportunity to at least make Art a champion. And then the actions following this, like, I don't genuinely really think she thought that Patrick would just give up. I genuinely think she knows Patrick better than that. And I think that she played these guys perfectly in order to be the best fucking tennis coach to both of them, to get them to play the game of their fucking lives. And also, again, I think that I know that there's going to be people who don't like this and say that cheating's always bad and, like, it's not an excuse. Sure, it's not an excuse, but I don't think storytelling should be interpreted 100% literally. I think Tashi absolutely succeeded in, like, achieving her goal of being the best fucking tennis coach in the business. And consequently, Art finally stopped hiding from himself. Like in, again, the metaphor of the movie where tennis allows people to have real open intimacy, Art and Patrick achieved a level of connection that Art had been closing himself off to for like decades probably. And that they all fucking won because they all felt fucking passion and fucking purpose and each other's bodies, probably. That's why the only answer is not Team Patrick, not Team Art, it's Team Thruple. This is it. This is it, baby. If you're like me and you can't stop thinking about challengers and you feel like you're going to be chasing the high of watching that last 10 minutes for the rest of your life, I have some movie recommendations for you that almost capture the spirit of this film. And what I mean by that is all these films are excellent and have many similarities, but maybe don't have like all of the components together, but they all, I feel like, scratch a very similar itch. First up, because we'll get to the cool prestige shit in a minute, Center Stage, a little 2000 ballet movie about catty, horny ballerinas that are incredibly messy. Listen, this movie is incredible, okay? Amanda is an aspiring prima ballerina with bad feet, okay? She's got a struggle, and she's got two sexy ballerina boys who are in love with her and fight over her. It's a little love triangle. Do all the points touch in this triangle like challengers? No, unfortunately they don't. We can't have it all. But there still is homoerotic tension. It's a fucking ballet movie, for the love of God. Also, there are actual gay characters, and Zoe Saldana plays Amanda's roommate, and she kind of steals the entire movie. She's fucking amazing. This movie is so much fun. It has some of the coolest ballet sequences ever. Great soundtrack. It's an amazing time. I told you we'd get to the prestigious shit, okay? Alfonso Cuarón does not fuck around. Y Tu Mama Tambien is an extremely sexy movie. This is like the R-iest R rating. Let me tell you, do not watch it with anyone who you are not intimately comfortable with. This movie has a young Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal, and they are extremely hot in this movie. And Marielle Verdu, who you may know from Pan's Labyrinth, plays an older woman that goes on a road trip with these two guys, and all three sides of the triangles touch. Let's just put it that way. This movie is incredibly sexy, but it's also just really moving and beautiful. It's a masterpiece. It's wonderful. You should definitely watch it. Sex Lies and Videotape is so good. Let me tell you, young James Spader is one of the hottest man who's ever lived. And this isn't so much as a love triangle as it's like an ABBA situation where there's four people and a lot of mess. But James Spader is incredibly hot. This is a movie that's very similar in that, like, the intimacy that you don't see is what makes this movie so sexy. It kind of reminds me of Challengers in that way. Andie MacDowell and James Spader are just so unbelievably hot in this movie. It's a really good movie. I'm really just putting this on the list out of necessity. If you haven't seen Bend It Like Beckham, consider it homework. This movie is a fucking classic. It's amazing. Obviously, one of Keira Knightley's first roles ever. Parminder Nagra plays Jess. She's a young Indian girl who wants to play soccer, but her very strict traditional parents are like, no, absolutely not. You can't do that. And listen, they might try to tell you that this movie is not queer cinema. They might try to tell you that these two girls both have a crush on the same guy and that's where the love triangle comes into play. But listen, there's a reason why people in this movie think that they're lesbians, okay? I'm just saying, there are reasons, all right? This movie's awesome. It's wonderful. It's peak 2000s. It's incredible. Also sports, okay? See? Okay, last one for now, Love and Basketball. See, checking multiple boxes. We got a sports movie. We got a love story. No, there's not really a love triangle in this movie. There are other people involved that these two people date during the film, but it's really like a story of people who are meant to be together and a lot of yearning and longing and, mess, okay? And it takes the place over many years and it's a will they, won't they, are they meant to be together? It's very romantic. There's a lot of sports. There's a lot of competitive flirting. It's got some vibes, and it's a fucking classic. This movie's incredible.
It's 11:47 at night. Your representative's offices are closed, but their voicemails are still open for you to call. So, go call your representatives, use the 5 Calls app, use unwrote.com. Call them. Call for a ceasefire. Please. Please just call. Hi, it's after 6 p.m. Do you know what that means? That means that your representatives' offices are closed. Your representatives' offices are closed. But you know what that means? It means that their voicemails are still open and available for calling, because even when the representative's office is closed, their voicemails don't. You can contact them anytime. You want to make a call at 3 in the morning? You can. If you think of it, at 3 in the morning when you were scrolling through your TikTok and you want to call your representatives to say, I would like a ceasefire in Gaza. This has gone on long enough. 30,000 people are dead. 10,000 of them are children. I have seen things that no one in the entire universe should have to see on my phone that are happening to real people in Gaza because of funding that you have approved with Congress. Please stop funding Israel and have a ceasefire called. You can call your representatives at any time after 5 p.m. and you won't have to talk to another person. You will just talk to a voicemail, and the voicemail can't talk back. And all you have to do is go to the 5 Calls app. That's the number 5 Calls app. And you click the call for de-escalation and ceasefire in Israel and occupied Palestine. And then you type in your address and it will give you a list of your representatives. Hi, my name is Jacqueline Frost. I'm a constituent from blah, blah, blah. I'm calling to urge my representative to support H.RES.786, which calls for an immediate de-escalation and ceasefire in Israel and Palestine. Enough innocent lives have already been lost. Thank you for your time and consideration. My address is blah, 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 because you have to leave your address, the full street address, to ensure that your call is tallied. Now, when you call your senators, it won't bring up the H.RES.786 part because that's only something that the representative deals with. But this is a 5-minute task. When the offices are closed, you don't have to talk to anybody, you talk to a voicemail, and your call is still tallied, your call is still marked, and you have done your part for the day. And then you can go on to the link in my bio that gets you an email application or an email that you can send out to your representatives that also says ceasefire now, please. It's easy as that, and you can be done. I don't know why I saluted. I salute nothing because I don't actually believe in anything that America's doing right now. But I do salute you for making the calls. Thank you. Hey, it's the weekend and it's a 3-day weekend and it's a 3-day weekend because there's a holiday on Monday that I don't particularly feel like celebrating if you live in America, but you know what I do feel like celebrating? I do feel like celebrating the fact that it's a weekend, and I also feel like celebrating the fact that my representatives' offices are closed. They may be closed, but you know what's open? You know what's really open for them? Their voicemail. So if you have social anxiety, you can go onto the 5 Calls app and call your representatives and say that you would like a ceasefire because you're seeing some of the worst things that have ever happened in the history of humanity happen right before your eyes on social media continuously, and boy, is that really affecting your vote. But also, if you are still feeling helpless, because I know I am still feeling helpless and I'm still feeling like I don't know what to do, you can find someone to donate to. And you can find someone to help so they can get out of Gaza, so they can get out of the fire zone. And today, I am going to be talking about Rania. Rania is a Canadian, but she has 16 members of her family, 8 of whom are children, stuck in Rafah, and they are trying to get her family out of Rafah through to Egypt so that they can be safe. And currently in the Olive Branch, the Operation Olive Branch profile, you can find them in bar 22. So the easiest way to do it is just to go to my profile, go into the schmink in my schmio, because it hates when I say the other thing, and you can find in, again, line 22 on the Excel spreadsheet, a link to assisting my family's journey to safety from Gaza. Rania personally messaged me asking for help, and I want to make sure that we can help Rania. I just donated $10. I will be donating more later. If you can, if you have anything that you can give, even just $1, please consider going to, again, the link in my bio and trying to help Rania in line 22 of Operation Olive Branch. And if you want to, you can look some more and find some other people that you can help. It helps me to feel just a little less helpless for 5 seconds, which is like a very selfish thing to say. And it does actually help. We are actually helping people. So please do what you can. Truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be a complete and total fuckboy. And if Jane Austen wrote Pride and Prejudice today, that would be her first line. And no one can tell me otherwise, because Mr. Darcy would seem like he was a Leo DiCaprio. Maybe not as bad as Leo DiCaprio. He would seem like he was a Leo DiCaprio, but he would be a George Clooney, you know? Like, George was actually just waiting for the right person to come along for him. He got married once, it didn't work out, he was waiting, and then he found the right person who's literally so much cooler than him, and he just like starts writing her these long form letters, but everyone would be like, oh, he just doesn't settle down, oh, he doesn't date, oh, he only dates people he's not serious about, and we would all kind of hate him, but he wouldn't be a Leo because Mr. Darcy is just secretly very shy and very awkward and kind of autistic coded if you really think about it, but not the point. The point is that he would seem like he was the worst and like a jerk, and this ice is stuck to the glass. But then he would prove himself otherwise. And Lizzie would probably seem like a party girl. She would seem like an Elle Woods type. Caroline Bingley would be a more serious sorority girl who like really she'd be a pick-me, because if you read Pride and Prejudice, if you like really sit down and just focus on Caroline Bingley's parts, first and foremost, she's lesbian coded. Second and foremost, she's a pick-me. She literally is like, Lizzie is one of those girls who will tear down other women just so men will like her. And I'm like, Caroline, that's literally what you're doing right now in this moment. Do you see that that's what you're doing right now in this moment? And then Bingley. We all know what I'm going to say. He would be a himbo. He would be the biggest himbo in the entire world. And that's what I love about him. He's just my little himbo. He's the himboest himbo of all time. I just want to make a live-action, modern-day Pride and Prejudice starring me. Toheeb Jamo from Ted Lasso would play Bingley because he's perfect. He's Samuel Basanya. I don't know who Darcy would be just yet off the top of my head. I would have to think about it for a second, but he would be just delightful. And it would be such a good movie. But it would start with them all seeming like fuckboys. And then we'd find out that Wickham is actually the fuckboy, but he seemed like a nice guy. Okay, bye! Here's the thing about the Chronicles of Narnia that I think people ignore. C.S. Lewis, people get really mad at Susan's ending. And then, because they're so mad at Susan's ending, they say that they're mad at C.S. Lewis and they hate how he ended things and how it's unfair and it's kind of sexist. And honestly, I don't think it is. And there are a lot of reasons for it. First and foremost, C.S. Lewis wrote Chronicles of Narnia in general for his goddaughter or niece, whose name is Lucy. He named one of the most, I think, dynamic children's characters of all time after a little girl that he happened to love and wanted to give her a story. And he had to work on it 4 years. Literally in the dedication of the book, because he dedicated The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to Lucy, he's like, you're probably going to be a grown-up by the time this publishes because it's taking me so long, but here you are. And then he kept creating the world around her and around everything. And the Pevensies, here's the thing, it could have just been a story about Lucy, or Lucy could have become a little boy character, and no one would have known the difference because people often put little boys in these books instead of little girls. But C.S. Lewis made it so that there were 2 girls and 2 boys. It was a 1-to-1 ratio no matter what he did. 1 girl, 1 boy in The Magician's Nephew. 2 girls, 2 boys in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. 1 boy, 1 girl in Horace and His Boy, and it just keeps going like that. He's making sure that things are equal and things are even so that both the boys and girls can relate to these characters. And that's a really big deal because that's not something that happens a lot. You look at the Harry Potter series. I'm sick of talking about the Harry Potter series on here. I'm really trying not to, but this is the closest thing that I've got to these. And what do you have? 2 boys, 1 girl. Percy Jackson, 2 boys, 1 girl. It just keeps going. It's always more boys than girls because that's what editors think will sell. But it's not, because Chronicles of Narnia really proves that you can have a girl as the main character, because Lucy was the main Pevensey, and it will still sell. And now, getting into the defense of Susan a tiny bit further, here's the thing. If I have read the Chronicle aright, there should be another. Has not your majesty 2 sisters? Where is Queen Susan? My sister Susan, answered Peter shortly and gravely, is no longer a friend of Narnia. Yes, said Eustace, and whenever you've tried to get her to come and talk about Narnia or do anything about Narnia, she says, what wonderful memories you have. Fancy you're still thinking about all those funny games we used to play when we were children. Oh, Susan, said Jill, she's interested in nothing nowadays except nylons and lipstick and invitations. She always was a jolly sight to keep too keen on being grown up. Grown up indeed, said Lady Polly. I wish she would grow up. She wasted all her school time wanting to be the age she is now, and she'll waste all the rest of her life trying to stay that age. So when I was a little kid, I was not allowed at all to call my friends after 8 o'clock p.m. at night. That was way too late to call my friends. I was told that I wasn't allowed to do it, even if it was an emergency. And, well, maybe if it was an emergency, maybe, if I absolutely forgot what the homework was, didn't have it written anywhere, and needed to know, or else because I had class tomorrow. Otherwise, not allowed to call my friends. Not allowed to call my friends on the landline because I didn't have a cell phone yet because I was a little kid. And times were different. Cell phones weren't for everyone. They were for very specific people. I'm old. Anyways. Another thing that I wasn't allowed to do when I was a kid was call friends between 5 to 7 p.m. because your friends could be eating between 5 and 7 p.m. So I wasn't allowed to call my friends between 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. at night. My parents would be like, they might be eating. They might be eating food right now. Do you really want to call your friends while they're eating food and interrupt their dinner? No, you don't. Be polite. Don't make calls. So basically, I just wasn't allowed to make phone calls. But you know what you can do? You know what you can do right now? You can call your representatives. And you can say that a man burned himself alive this weekend, asking for Palestine to be freed while Joe Biden was eating an ice cream cone. You can say that while you're eating right now at 7 o'clock at night because you have access to food, people in North Gaza are taking animal grain and sewer water and they're making them into loaves of bread or you can tell your representatives that while you have access to healthcare, while you have access to the medication that you need, I'm on an SSRI, I have that every day. You could tell them that while you have access to these things, people in Gaza barely have access to the gauze that their country invented. And then, when you're done calling your representatives, I highly recommend actually using the UNWRA page because, or UNRWA, UNRWA, page, because once you put call representatives, I'll put the thing right here, you just fill out some information, it sends you to the call list, you make your calls, and then it sends you to the email list, and you just press in email, and then it sends you to a tweet link for all your representatives, and you can tweet your representatives going, what the fuck is wrong with you? And it makes life a lot easier. You get 3 done in 1. Or if you don't have time to make the call, you can just go to the email. I like their email format a lot better than the one I've been using up until now. So I think that if you have a minute today, please call your representatives. Please ask for a ceasefire from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. And when you are done with those tasks of contacting your representatives, if you have money, you can go to the link in my bio to the Operation Olive Branch page. And there you will find a list of so many families that you can donate to. Their money goes straight to them. It helps them to flee Gaza because of everything that is going on there right now. Or if you want families that I've already donated to myself, they're also in my link tree, in my bio. Please go, pick 1, pick 2, pick 7. Please do what you can, okay? So here's the thing. A few weeks ago, I was at this work event that I had to go to. It was terrible. It was the worst thing ever because we were doing a bunch of hiking events and then hang gliding or whatever. And I was freaked out the entire time because it's terrifying. It's scary. So I was the last one to go on every single event for my group. But another group from our same building was also there. And at the last event, at the last of the events, I make eye contact with this guy. And he's really cute. He's blonde, green eyes, just tall, gorgeous. And I'm like, hi. But obviously he's not looking at me. He's looking at somebody else because I've been making a fool out of myself all day. And he's seen. So there's no way he could be looking at me. But then he comes up to me and he talks to me and we start talking. We start getting to know each other. And then we keep talking. Not fully. We don't exchange any information, but then we just keep bumping into each other because we work in the same building. And we at each other on Instagram because we work in the same building. I cannot explain this enough. And then we start dating. And while we start dating, it's a very slow event, okay? We're taking it very slowly because we're just getting to know each other and we want to do this right because we have good feelings and good intentions for each other. While we're dating slowly and I'm trying to tell my best friend, my favorite person in the entire world, about everything that's happening, my cousin is getting married. And my cousin is kind of a bitch. She's kind of the worst person I've ever met in my entire life. She doesn't have TikTok, so I don't have to worry about her seeing this. But she's the worst human being I've ever met in my entire life. And it's the worst thing that anyone could possibly do to have to be in her wedding. And then she decides that I'm in her wedding. And that's no bueno, no fun. Her future husband is brothers with the guy that I'm talking to. That's great. That's one thing. But so my best friend still not happy for me. Still not happy with the fact that I'm dating this guy. And I keep going, why? I haven't dated someone in so long. I'm finally excited about this guy. I've gotten a bajillion and a half terrible dates. This guy could be the one. And she's saying, well, what about your best friend? And I'm like, what about my best friend? What about him? And she's like, he obviously likes you. And I'm like, he has literally never shown a single dollop of interest in me in my life. All he ever does is tell me that I don't read enough. I don't even know why we're friends. I do. I love him. He's so sweet. He's so nice. He's not any guy that I would ever be interested in dating. But she keeps telling me, no, you don't understand. He's in love with you. He's in love with you. And I'm like, he's not. He's never shown interest. This guy is showing interest. This guy wants to meet my parents, for God's sake. And then I have to start talking to my friend, which is terrible, which is the worst thing ever, because now I'm like, are you interested in me? And I'm starting to get awkward around him because I'm like, are you interested in me? I feel like you're not interested in me because when we see each other in person, we fight, but when we talk on Instagram, we're fine, you know? And then the other one proposes. Anyways, I did a really bad job of retelling that, but this is a book called Courting Samira by Amal Awad. The author is Palestinian, and the main character is also a 27-year-old Palestinian whose favorite book is The Princess Bride, or no, favorite movie is The Princess Bride, which is my favorite movie in the entire world, and also my favorite book in the entire world. And the entire, like, premise is basically, it's so Emma-based, like, it feels like Emma by Jane Austen, but set in the Islamic world. It's set in Australia, but, like, every character is Islamic. And oh, it's so beautiful and so well written, and it's just like this great book for reading joy. If you are looking for a quick read that also will just make you happy the entire way through, everyone has character growth. Everyone goes through something. Like, even tiny little side characters give character growth in this book. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. I love it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
When we discuss Romeo and Juliet, it's very important to me that people realize that Juliet Capulet is actually the main character of Romeo and Juliet. So when you have stories like this, you have the main character and then you have the romantic lead. So, like, you have the lead, romantic lead, right? Juliet is the lead and then Romeo is the romantic lead. And the way that I really think that this plays out and that you can see it is that Juliet is actually the one, if you read the play, not watch the movies, none of the movies have half of Juliet's monologues, and Juliet's monologues are some of the most important story parts of all of Romeo and Juliet. She is what moves the plot forward, and the movies consistently decide to forget that so that Romeo can have more screen time because they want to make the male character the main lead. But Juliet is here, and she is talking about the struggles that she's having with falling in love with this man who is technically her enemy, and then it's talking about the struggles of her love with him and how she wants to go meet him and how he got banished. And Romeo has these lines and things about being banished, but Romeo is honestly the more childish of the two. And again, I don't think that these two characters are childish. I think that everything that they're doing very much has a point, and that this is a time period where they're falling in love they're a little young, but they're not as young as you would think. It would be like if a 20-year-old got married now. You'd be like, ooh, you're a little young. This could work if you let it. But everything that they do has a point and has a matter. In Juliet's monologues, she has this entire monologue that we never see in any of the movies, where right before she takes the poison, well, not the poison, but the potion that's going to make her look like she's dead for hours on end, she has this entire monologue where she's slowly losing her mind before she takes this because she's freaking out so badly. I'm moving Rapunzel. Sorry, Rapunzel. And I have done this monologue many times because when I was an actress, I would just remember Shakespeare off the time, because I love it, Shakespeare, and I love Romeo and Juliet, and I've written many essays on this. But Juliet says goodbye to her nurse and to her mother after they've closed the door, because she's saying goodbye in her own personal way because she knows that she's never going to see them again. And then she starts talking about drinking the potion, and then she's like, oh my god, what if it's a poison and the friar's trying to kill me? And she's still like, well, he is a holy man, he would never do that. And then she's like, oh my god, but what if this doesn't work and I have to marry Paris tomorrow? And then she takes a knife and she's like, I am ready to die rather than marry a man I do not truly love. And then, right before she starts taking the potion, she sees her cousin Tybalt's ghost. And we are like, oh my god, is she crazy? But it's like, is she crazy or is she actually seeing this ghost? Shakespeare has ghosts in his other plays. Like, are we seeing ghosts or is she actually seeing him before she travels to this other side? Because we don't know what happens to her when she's gone. I can go on.
Romeo and Juliet, Juliet Capulet is the main character. Romeo Montague is the side character. Not even the side character. He's the romantic lead, but he's not the lead. Juliet, I would say, is the lead. Yes, she comes in later in the story, but that can be said about a lot of separate actual stories where title characters, where the main characters are written almost secondary. A big one, Great Gatsby. Another big one would be Othello. Othello, which is completely and utterly narrated by Iago the entire time, but Othello is still the main character. Anyways, I bring this up because this commenter is asking, should we just rewrite the entirety of Romeo and Juliet so it's about Juliet? And the answer is no, because it's not necessary. Because the entire play is already about Juliet and her family, and Romeo and his family, with Juliet again being the main character, with Juliet again being the lead. But the thing is, you don't have to rewrite any of this to show it. Nothing needs to be rewritten. And I actually think when people do rewrite and retell, a lot of Romeo and Juliet adaptations miss the point, or even just plays that do Romeo and Juliet. I like spilled coffee. Cool. Even just the 1998 Romeo and Juliet or the 1968, they just take out a lot of Juliet's monologues, a lot of her scenes, a lot of her alone time, where she is narrating her own life or trying to make her own decisions, and we miss all of that because the directors decide to go another way and show Romeo as being the lead, or really focus on the action of the story, and the action is a big part of the story. It is. The story literally starts with a sword fight where people die, and the prince comes in and he's like, what is wrong with all of you? You guys are the worst part of my job. I'm the leader of a country and you guys make it really hard for me. Like, literally that's what the prince says basically the entire play. He's like, I'm literally gonna kill all of you if you keep doing this. And then Juliet comes in, and Juliet's not looking for love. She's actually actively being like, I mean, I'll look to like if looking like a move, but no deeper will I endurt mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly. When her mom's like, could you like if Paris is love because Paris loves you and he wants to marry you? And Juliet's like, ooh, I don't know, man. I'm 13 years old, but thank you for the option. Thank you for the option. We'll see. And then Romeo comes in and he sees her from across the room, and Juliet sees him from across the room, and he's like, and she's like, and then they start talking, and he like sneaks over to say hi to her, and he's like, if I consent with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this, my lips, two blushing pilgrims ready stand to seal that rough touch, because he grabbed her with a gentle kiss. And Juliet's like, good pilgrim, you do wrong your hands too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this, for saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss, as in, we should pray on this, you fucking creep. But she's also hardcore flirting with him. Like, this is the flirtiest thing ever in that entire time that they're talking to each other. Right there, it's actually a sonnet. It's a sonnet. But anyways, back to my original point. My original point is, of course, that Juliet is the main character, and she doesn't need to have her story retold to show that. The story itself already, where's my oat milk, shows that very well if given the chance. It's just a lot of directors, especially in the 2013 Romeo and Juliet starring Douglas Booth and Haley Steinfeld, that I thought was going to be perfect, immaculate, wonderful. The costuming, amazing. The casting, phenomenal. Haley Steinfeld as Juliet, okay. Douglas Booth at his finest when he was young as Romeo, yes. Chuck Bass from Gossip Girl as fucking Tybalt, yes. Okay, this was some amazing casting. And I went to the theater, and I was so excited to see the movie, and I went with my mommy, and we go in, and we start watching, and 10 minutes in, I'm going, they changed, that's not the line. They just added 16 separate lines in that scene. Why is there a separate fucking story where Tybalt's into Juliet, and they felt the need to add an entire script for it? There are ways that you could write or show Tybalt being into Juliet without having to add lines to Romeo and Juliet. You can show whatever you want in Romeo and Juliet if you give it enough choice and enough chance. I literally think that Juliet Capulet is a witch, and you could absolutely show Juliet Capulet being a witch without adding a single other line into the story. You know why? You know fucking why? Because it's already kind of there in the script, and you just have to know how to show it, and you don't have to add lines to it. It's just about how you format the scene. I got really heated in the end because I really get angry when it comes to the 2013 Romeo and Juliet, which is actually, like, when I say a curse on both your houses, a curse on both the fucking white men who thought they knew better than William Shakespeare. Anyways, I just think that you don't need, like, Anne Juliet, the Broadway musical, or any of that. Like, you don't need a jukebox musical to go, what if Juliet actually lived? You can literally just go, hey, this was Juliet's life, and also she had agency, and these were her choices, and she made these choices for a reason. Yay. Okay, bye.